as described in Piaget's theory of cognitive development and in Bruner's theory of cognitive development. It is expected that after completion of this session, the viewers will be able to recall the Piaget's theory of cognitive development, define the technical terms used in Piaget's theory, two examples related to various indicators of a particular stage of thinking, identify various thinking behaviors exhibited in different stages of thinking, recall the Bruner's theory of cognitive development, define the technical terms used in Bruner's theory, compare the views of Piaget and Bruner related to cognitive development of a child, plan their teaching in light of both the theories. Let us first talk about Piaget's theory. Before going to the different stages suggested by Piaget in his theory, let us understand the background of this. Piaget, who is known as Swiss psychologist, was basically a biologist. While he was working in Alfred Binet's laboratory, and when Binet was working on an intelligence test for the children, the reasons children gave for their wrong answers fascinated Jean Piaget and prompted him to study the thinking behind their answers. The children were answering wrong, and they were explaining their wrong answers, and it attracted Piaget to work upon. Then he, along with his wife, who was earlier his student, they started observing their own 3 children, and then Piaget devised a model describing how humans go about making sense of their world by gathering and organizing information. According to Piaget, certain ways of thinking are quite simple for an adult, are not so simple for a child. For example, if I ask a question to an adult that can you be at 3 places at the same time, that suppose in Mumbai, in Patna, obviously an adult will say no, it is not possible. However, in case of children it is not so simple. Simply they will not say that no, I cannot be. They may say yes, I can be at 3 places at the same time. That is why Piaget said with physical maturation comes the increasing ability to act on the environment and learn. As we act on the environment, exploring, testing, observing and organizing information, we alter our thinking. We explore something, we test it, we observe something in our environment, we organize information from the environment, and then accordingly process. The third factor is social transmission. In social transmission, a child learns from others' experiences. For example, if he sees someone that people are not stepping down from a moving bus, they learn that we should not from a moving bus. If it could not happen, then each and every child had to reinvent everything. Because of this social transmission, we need not to reinvent everything. The fourth factor is equilibration, which is one of the most factors which is a part of Piaget's theory. And before moving this to this fourth factor, equilibration, let us understand some related concept to this equilibration. Piaget mentioned that all species inherit 2 basic tendencies. One is organization and one is adaptation. Organization includes combining, arranging, recombining and rearranging, while adaptation includes adapting the environment. Regarding talking about organization, Piaget mentioned that people are born with a tendency to organize their thinking processes into psychological structures, and Piaget coined the term schemes. And according to Piaget, schemes are the basic building blocks of thinking. These schemes can be very small and specific, like recognizing a dog, a scheme of recognizing a dog, or larger, how to drive a vehicle, how to drive a car, a scheme of driving a car. So, schemes can be very small as well as very large. As a processes become more organized and new schemes develop, behavior also becomes more sophisticated and better suited to the environment. When a person interacts with different schemes are developed, different schemes are connected, and schemes for larger schemes are developed, then thinking becomes more sophisticated. Adaptation includes 2 things. assimilation and another is accommodation. Assimilation means one is trying to understand something new by fitting it into what we already know. If I have a scheme already in my mind and I find something new, first I try to fit that new thing or new scheme into my existing scheme. For example, if first time I see a child sees a guinea pig, since guinea pig appears like a rabbit and there is already a scheme in child's mind to identify, to recognize a rabbit, first he thinks that it is a rabbit. It is a kind of assimilation when he is trying to understand something new by fitting it into what he already knows. And the second thing is accommodation, when that new thing is not assimilated with the existing scheme, then the child must change existing scheme to respond to a new situation. For example, when a child, he already knows, he already has a scheme of riding a cycle, but now he finds a cycle with a different kind of brakes. In some cycles there are this kind of brakes, in some cycle there are this kind of brakes, and the child is already knowing this kind of braking system in a cycle. He has a scheme in his mind how to use brakes, this kind of brakes in a cycle, but now he found a cycle with this kind of brakes. So, this is a new scheme is required here. So, the child learns to ride a cycle with this different kind of brakes. In this process he accommodates and he changes existing schemes to respond to this new situation. People adapt to their increasingly complex environment by using existing schemes whenever these schemes work, that is assimilation. If the existing schemes are working for the new situations, I do not change my existing schemes, is assimilation, and by modifying and adding to their schemes when something new is needed, that is accommodation. So, the process of assimilation or accommodation goes on. There are certain situations when neither assimilation nor accommodation is used. For example, if I am passing by and two people are talking in their language which is unknown to me, I do not care, neither I try to assimilate nor I try to accommodate, I simply ignore it. According to Piaget, actual changes in thinking takes place through the process of equilibration. And equilibration is an act of searching for balance. Piaget mentions that people continuously test the adequacy of their thinking process in order to achieve that balance. That is, existing schemes works, equilibrium exists, if not then disequilibrium, so accommodation. Let us understand this thing with the help of two examples. First, take an example, a glass filled with water. There is a glass and water is filled in that. Water is stable, kind of equilibrium is there. Now, I put some pebbles into this glass and the equilibrium of this water level is disturbed. This situation is called disequilibrium. After some time, when the pebbles are set at the bottom, new equilibrium is achieved. Earlier this was the equilibrium of water level, now pebbles are added into that glass, and this condition of disequilibrium came. Now new equilibrium is achieved at this stage. This is situation of equilibrium, disequilibrium and again equilibrium. Another example we can take that, suppose as a child I know that Sanskrit is the oldest language of world. This is an equilibrium state of my knowledge, of my thinking. My existing scheme is working and I am happy with that equilibrium is there. One day I came across, one person told me that no, Sanskrit is not the oldest language of the world, Tamil is the oldest language of the world. Now my existing scheme is disturbed, my equilibrium is disturbed, there is a equilibrium. So I have to either go with the existing scheme, or I have to change my existing scheme to accommodate the new information. I will try to find, what will I do? I will try to find which is true whether Sanskrit is the oldest language or Tamil is the oldest language, and after searching I came to know that Tamil is the person was right and the Tamil is the oldest language of the world. So, now I accepted that no, Sanskrit is not the oldest language of the world, Tamil is the oldest language of the world. So, my new equilibrium is achieved and thus my thinking is enhanced. Earlier my equilibrium was there that Sanskrit is the oldest language. With that information that no, Sanskrit is not the oldest language, a kind of situation of disequilibrium came, and then with the certainty of the new information, no, that Tamil is the oldest language, new status of equilibrium is there. Equilibrium and equilibrium works and the process of thinking goes like this according to Piaget, and this is the concept of equilibration. So, when we talked about 4 factors which are influencing, which are interacting to influence thinking, or biological maturity, activity, social, this equilibration. One thing is important here to note that optimum level of disequilibrium is required. It means that the new information or new thing which is disturbing my existing equilibrium, if it is too less in quantity, it is not sufficient, then I will ignore it and simply go with my existing equilibrium. So, I will not try to accommodate nothing new, then it will not work. Another case, if the information or the point which is disturbing my equilibrium is too high level, then again I will try to ignore it. I will not take so much pain, then I will not go to the new equilibrium again, I will keep with my equilibrium, earlier equilibrium. So, to change in thinking process, it is important to note that optimum level of disequilibrium is required. Now, we come to the 4 stages as given by Piaget in his theory. Piaget believed that all people pass through the same 4 stages in exactly the same order, but different period of transition may be there for a different child. The Piaget emphasized that levels are these 4, one will pass this stage 1 and then come to the stage 2 and then comes to the stage 3 and then come to the stage 4. He mentioned time duration for each and every stage, but it is also to understand that one child may take his or her own time to transit from one stage to another stage. That is why Orlando and McAdoo in 1996 concluded that knowing a student's age is never a guarantee you will know how the child thinks. For example, if Piaget said that this is the phase of stage 1 0 to 2 years and in this stage a child is thinking in this way. Now, if I encounter a child of 1.5 years, I cannot guarantee that he is thinking on the same way. There are chances that his or her phase of transition was shorter and now he has moved to the next stage. The 4 stages given by Piaget are sensory motor stage, which prevails from 0 to 2 years. According to Piaget, the second stage is pre-operational stage, which prevails from 2 to 7 years. The third stage is concrete operational stage, which prevails 7 to 11 years, and the fourth stage is formal operational stage, that prevails from 11 years onwards to the adulthood. Now, we discuss about these stages one by one. The first stage which Piaget talked about is sensory motor stage, which prevails from 0 to 2 years. In this stage, the thinking of a child involves seeing, hearing, moving, touching, tasting and so on. During this stage, development of object permanence is there. What is the meaning of object permanence? Object permanence means when the child accepts or understands the permanent existence of an object. Let us understand with the help of one example. For a very for example, 6-month infant, up to 6 months age infant, a baby, when the baby or the infant is playing with a toy, you simply take away this toy and hide it. The child immediately forgets about the toy. The child thinks that there is no toy. Out of the sight, out of the existence is no more. But within this sensory motor stage, after certain periods, generally after 6 months, the stage of object permanence comes, when even you hide the toy, the child understands that toy is there, though it is not in front of my eyes, but it is there. That is why when a child achieves this object permanence stage, when you snatch the toy and hide it, the child tries to find it under the sheet or somewhere else. So, this is an indicator of development of object permanence, which is achieved in this sensory motor stage, which is from 0 to 2 years. In the same stage, beginning of logical goal directed actions starts. Again the same situation, a very 2 or 3 month old infant, you give him or her a plastic toy container with lid. First the child tries to take out the toys, but since the lid is there and the toys do not come out, he tries to take out the toys, but after 1 or 2 attempts or certain attempts he just leaves it, because it is not possible for him to take the toys out. But when the this stage, beginning of logical goal directed actions starts, what will child do? That first he will try to take out the toys, and if the toys are not coming out, he will observe it, he will open the lid, takes out the toys, and if while taking out the toys, if some toys are stuck, he will try to shake the container. In the same sensory motor stage, learning to reverse action. In the take the previous example of this plastic toy container with lid, the child can also refill the container with those toys. One thing is important here to mention and to note that in this stage the child is learning to reverse action, but not reverse thinking. There are two different things. Reverse action is related to motor activity, however, reverse thinking is some higher ability, which we will discuss in coming slides. In this sensory motor stage, reflex action of a child converts into intentional activities. Then the next stage of this Piaget's theory comes, and that is called pre-operational stage. The term is pre-operational. The domain of this or the duration of this pre-operational stage according to Piaget is 2 to 7 years. Before understanding the concept of pre-operational stage, let us understand what is the term operational operation means. According to Piaget, operation are the actions that are carried out and reversed mentally rather than physically. Remember the previous example, when child was refilling the container, the toy container, it was a physical activity. He was reversing the action physically. In operation, the process are reversed mentally rather than physically. Since it is pre-operational stage, so these kind of operations are not there again. This stage is pre-operational, so absence of reversible thinking, operation is not there. Again an example of reversible thinking is that if A is B's brother, so B is also A's brother, but in pre-operational, since it is an operational in which the child is capable to think reversibly, it is a mental process, but in pre-operational stage the child is not capable to think reversibly. So, there is absence of reversible thinking in pre-operational stage, and absence of conservation is also there in pre-operational stage. What is the meaning of conservation here? Conservation, let us take an example. I kept water, same quantity of water into different containers. The same quantity of water is first put in a container with the broad circumference. It is a broader vessel or broader glass. In this situation, the level of water is lower. Then in front of a child, I poured the same water into another glass which is of narrow dimension. Then the child thinks that the water quantity is more in the glass with narrow circumference. If a child is able to understand the water quantity is same, then the stage of conservation has been achieved. If it is not accepted by the child, then the status of conservation is not achieved. In pre-operational stage, the conservation is absent. What is present in pre-operational stage? Presence of semiotic function. It means the child symbols to represent an object that is not present. Child uses such kind of symbols. For example, if you see around that children are riding a stick and saying that it is my horse or it is my bike. This kind of semiotic function which is found in pre-operational stage. In pre-operational stage 2 to 7 years, the child is egocentric. Here egocentric does not mean selfish, but children assume that every else share their feelings, reactions and perspectives. For example, child thinks that if I love dogs, everybody loves dogs. That is why they do not understand in this stage that your right hand is not on the same side as theirs when you are facing them. For example, if I am a child and I am saying this is my right hand, someone is standing in front of me and he or she is saying that this is his or her right hand, I will not accept in this stage. I will say no, since my right hand is this side, your right hand is also this side. This is situation of egocentric. Then comes the concrete operational stage. In this operational stage, presence of reversibility and conservation is there. The reversible thinking is there with the child. Presence of classification is there. Classification is also related to reversibility, in which ability to think through a series of steps, then mentally reverse the steps and return to the starting point. For example, a child can classify plates with by size, then again classify by color, then again classify by material, etc. One says steel plate, glass plate, melamine plate, like that. In the concrete operational stage, presence of seriation is there, that a child can orderly arrange from large to small or vice versa. In concrete operational stage again, development of a complete and very logical system of thinking is there, but the system of thinking is still tied to physical reality. The child can think or logically arrange only to the physical situations. That is why it is concrete operational. The next stage is, the fourth stage is, that is the highest stage according to Piaget, is formal operational stage. In this, focus of thinking can shift from what is to what might be. It means we can think, a child can think instead of a physically present thing, imaginary, about the imaginary things, what might be. Abstract thinking is there. The child can make different permutation and combination in his or her mind without the physical presence of a thing. Hypothetical deductive reasoning is there, inductive reasoning is there, and in this situation adolescent egocentrism is also there. Adolescent egocentrism means they are not denying others' perception. In egocentrism in previous stage, the child was not ready to accept others' viewpoint. He was thinking that everybody is thinking according to his or her viewpoint. But in this adolescent egocentrism, the child is not denying others' perception, but he or she is focusing on own beliefs. Now, the later part of this presentation is Bruner's theory. James S. Bruner, like other developmentalists, hypothesized that one's thought processes evolves as a result of maturation, training and experiences through a series of sequential stages. In his theory, Bruner proposed 3 stages. First is inactive, second is iconic and third is symbolic. In Bruner's 3 stages, inactive stages is characterized by the child's representation of things and events in terms of appropriate motor responses and activities. The child is unable to make use of language images or other symbolic representations, only motor representations are there, responses are there. The child acts out and represents them through non-verbal activities based on motor actions. So, there is no development of language, so the actions are non-verbal and motor actions in this inactive stage. In the iconic stage of Bruner, this stage is characterized by the child's representation on things and events in terms of sensory images or mental pictures. Again, the things has been shifted from the physical presence to the mental presence, but again in terms of images or pictures, not in terms of language in iconic stage. The third stage according to Bruner is symbolic stage, in which things and events not necessarily depend upon the motor activities or sensory image or mental pictures. Here, since the language development has taken place, the symbolic representation in the form of words, symbols and other imaginary abstract phenomena is there. For example, in this stage, if you ask a child that okay, you have 5 mangoes, your sister has 3 mangoes, So, if we divide equally these mangoes among 5 people, what will be the division magnitude? Then the child in this stage, symbolic stage, can think. He can develop imaginary verbal rules in his mind, because language development has taken place, while this was not possible in previous 2 stages suggested by the Bruner. So, friends, in this session we discussed about background of Piaget's theory, different terms used in Piaget's theory, 4 stages according to Piaget's theory and 3 stages according to Bruner's theory. Now, you should, after this session, you must ask yourself that students in your class are at which stage of thinking according to Piaget or Bruner. You must try to identify them. You should think that are you ready to accommodate the difference of transition in your class, as we discussed in our session that everybody has his or her own time of transition from one stage to another transition. Third one, that as a teacher, what can you do to promote next stage of thinking in your students? You must think about this thing. I hope this session would have been helpful to understand the Piaget's concepts and the Bruner's concept regarding child development and thinking. We will meet in some other session with some other topic. Thank you for patient listening. Thank you very much.